my name is Julian Braxton, and welcome to Journey in Strength. I am so pleased to have as my very special guest one of my favorite preachers, the one and only Reverend Dr. Willie Dwayne Francois III. Reverend Francois is the senior pastor of the Mount Zion Baptist Church in Pleasantville, New Jersey, and he is the president of the Black Church Center for Justice and Equality. He serves as assistant professor of liberation theology at the New York Theological Seminary and directs a master's degree program at the Sing Sing Correctional Facility. He created the Public Love Organizing and Training Project and has served in various organizations engaging in racial and social justice issues, including the Atlantic City chapter of Black Lives Matter, the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference, and the New Jersey MLK Jr. Commission. He is the author of the powerful book, Silencing White Noise, 6 Practices to Overcome Inaction on Race. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Francois to Journey in Strength. Thank you again for joining me on Journey in Strength. And there's so much I want to tackle with you in our time together, but I guess I wanted to begin really at the beginning. And I wonder, how would you respond to this question? How would you describe your faith journey?
Wow. Thanks for having me, Brother Braxton. I'm excited to be here. So my faith journey has been, in some ways, it has been fairly traditional. In other ways, it has been circuitous. I started my faith life in my home church in Galveston, Texas, called First Union Baptist Church. There, I really came to know what it means to be a disciple, a follower of the way of Jesus, by looking at the model of my maternal grandmother, who now lives in sainted memory, and the kind of resilience, the kind of compassion, the kind of collectivism that we forged there in Galveston has been so foundational for who I am as somebody who is following the Palestinian carpenter Jesus, right? But my childhood faith upbringing was very conservative, right? It's Texas. It's Texas. It's Baptist. It's patriarchal to a great extent, and it is also not really socially conscious in any particular way. But I cannot deny the enormous impact and just the graciousness of what it meant to be held in community by those elderly Black women in Galveston. And it wasn't until I got to Morehouse College that I was really able to explore a more radical version of the way of Jesus, a more radical version of Christianity, where I literally had to shed so much of the conservatism that had become the markers of my faith tradition. So I grew up in the church. I'm a child of the church, but I've spent probably the last 20 years of my life, since about 17 years old. So about 19 years of my life shedding and deconstructing so much of the Christianity that is toxic and vitriolic.
Wow, I just want to say what you described very much sounds like my church. I grew up in New York City. I went to church in Harlem, and my church could very well be a church in the South. I mean, you had all these people, my mother's generation, that were all born and raised in South Carolina, North Carolina, part of that Great Migration. And what I realize is that you are in it, and you're not even able to know that you're being um, I don't know, indoctrinated or whatever the word you might use, by these conservative ideas and values about the role of men and ideas around gender. And so I'm wondering, how do you talk about that process, and how do you still remain in relationship with those people who shaped you in that way?
Yeah, yeah. I talk about it as being like there were certain conservative values and assumptions that were programmed into my hard drive, and I had no idea the impact, nor did I have any idea the consequences of these said influences. And like reading. James Baldwin says that you think your life is the hardest life until you read. So it was like reading about the faith, reading about Jesus as someone who is not allied with white capitalism or allied with Americanism in any particular way, but Jesus who is literally a victim of his own government, Jesus who is literally on the underside of colonialism. Like reading about that Jesus started to help me to unwed from the assumptions that had been programmed into my hard drive. And what was very difficult was divorcing these ideas from the people I inherited them from,
Yeah.
right? Because I love my grandmother. I love my grandfather. I love so many to this day. I love so many of those senior Black women who served as surrogate aunts and surrogate grandmothers in a lot of way, that I had to get to the point where I was able to separate them from their beliefs, to get to the point where I was able to name for myself that they too are products of the same kind of programming that I was a victim of to a great degree. And they didn't have, or they don't have, the luxury of this liberal arts education that's allowing them to do the work of deconstruction. No, they're trying to figure out, how do we pay bills? They're trying to figure out, how do we take care of families? They're trying to figure out, how do we keep this church alive on their tithes, on their dinners, on their sacrificing, that they actually don't have the kind of privilege that was afforded to me as a Black man, as a young Black man, to raise questions about a faith tradition that they've known their entire lives. And so I had to really lean into the idea that just as I was programmed, they were programmed, and in their minds, they are doing the charitable work of bringing me along, right? And so creating that kind of space, creating that kind of condition where I'm able to read them in a social context that was also my social context.
That's so powerful. Let me just add that I have to say about my church is that I am who I am because of that church, right? So it's all of that. It's both and, right? So the things that you wish that weren't so, but it is, and the way that the community of love, of faith, of support, you cannot replace that in any way. Education doesn't replace that.
No, it doesn't. And the moment that you allow your education to cause you to retreat from those foundational communities in ways that don't honor what the good, right? I could sit here and name the places that I felt traumatized in that space, or the places within me where I think I was underserved as a child, and those still pale in comparison to the ways that I was taught how to care for community, the ways I was taught what it meant to live within a network that was mutually beneficial, the ways that I was taught what it meant to care for sacred space, and to honor that certain space is sacred, right? I learned that from those church mothers who don't think like me, don't theologize the way I do, don't conceive of God the way I conceive of God. But I don't have so much of what I love about me without their investments.
I amen to that. I completely hear you and identify with you on that. And could you talk about how you believe that social justice uh, is critical to theology? Because so much of your ministry and so many of your sermons that I've had a chance to listen to is about social justice and about history. And some of that, may have been missing growing up. But one of the things that I reflect on is how critical that is in terms of our movement and projection as a people. And that has been part of your ministry. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I understand social justice as an article of faith. It is not ancillary to the way I follow Jesus. It is not partial to the way I follow Jesus in terms of like fragmented anyway. But it is a key ingredient to what I think it means to be a disciple of the way. And because I understand Jesus to be a product of an abolitionist tradition, you cannot talk about the foundations of ancient Judaism without naming the Exodus as a signal and cardinal event, right? That Jesus comes from a people who were, yes, controlled, people who were colonized, people who were enslaved, but also people who were liberated.
Right.
And people who were given a role to play in the manifestation of justice and the manifestation of peace in the world. That's the tradition. Jesus comes from the womb of a people who know oppression, but also know what it means to fight for freedom alongside and with the impetus of their covenant keeping God. It is no mistake that Jesus' first sermon in a Nazareth sanctuary or Nazareth synagogue is drawn from Isaiah, where Jesus talks about the Spirit of the Lord being upon him to preach good news to the poor. If you run those points in Jesus' first sermon, good news to the poor, that sounds like anti-poverty engagement. Setting the captive free, that sounds like anti-incarceration work. The recovery of sight to the blind, that sounds like, to me, affordable health care. The acceptable year of the Lord, which we know is the Hebrew understanding of the year of Jubilee, which was every 50 years, the land was given a break. Land that was taken was restored to its original owners. All debt was forgiven and slaves were emancipated. That sounds like abolition and reparations. Like you have Jesus who offers us in his first sermon in Luke 4 a platform that I think this country needs in Washington, right? Yes. A platform that this country needs in Massachusetts and in New York State, right? So it's hard for me to separate Jesus from that tradition, because what is he? Jesus is born of a teenage mother. Jesus is born of two poor itinerant carpenter. He himself becomes a poor itinerant carpenter. He's profiled by the religious establishment. He is profiled by the temple police of his day. He spends a lot of time with those who are pushed to the margins, who are politically vulnerable, both in their religious context and in the imperial context. This is a man who dies at the hands of the state. He is literally a victim of a failed criminal justice system. And so how can we not be engaged in the work of criminal justice reform when we claim as Christians, I'm a follower of Jesus, when we claim as Christians to be followers of a man who was a convicted felon who ultimately dies on death row? Right? Like all of those things come together to say, no, this faith tradition has to say something about the social traumas and the political ails of our time that are really threatening our democracy.
Well, everything that you describe is a big charge each Sunday to come up with a word for the people on all these issues. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you go about your maybe a weekly routine in trying to figure out what the people need to hear about the time that we're living in right now. Every time I turn around, everyone's talking about this is the most important election. We're living through the most perilous times. How do you go about preparing?
Yeah. One thing I know people need to hear every week is about the ethic to embody love. I think that is what's at the heart of the Jesus movement. It's a call to be love. It's a call not just to show, not just to have, but a call for us to incarnate, to enflesh, to be love in the world for those who have been deemed unlovable, for those who have lived lives of lovelessness, for those who live on the underside of structural hate, like mass incarceration, like healthcare apartheid, like food insecurity, like school segregation, right? I know that when I stand to preach, or I create community with the people that I am privileged to pastor, that I know throughout the week they've lived under structural hate in some way. And what they do need to hear is a word about love. It's a word about public love, a word about structural love, a word about interpersonal love, a word about self-love. And so even as I'm doing these calls to justice, and I'm trying to do the work of conscientizing, raising the consciousness of those that I do life with and do ministry with, I know that when I'm talking about justice and I'm talking about the work of repair, I'm talking about the work of love. I'm talking about the work of what it means to be loved in a world that is so rapidly divided, a world that is so fatally partisan. That is what we need to hear. So throughout the week, I'm inundated with the data of dysfunction that is American democracy, right? That I know it's been some time now, but I've not been able to shake the kind of ocular trauma, the kind of emotional fixation on what happened on January 6th, which we know was fueled by both race and religion. So as I'm preparing to preach, I'm obviously holding seriously what has happened that week, holding seriously what is happening in the public square. I'm thinking attunely about the narratives and the stories that our congregants have brought to me in writing, via text or email, or during our spiritual guidance sessions, or during Q&A, during Bible study. And I'm trying to figure out, well, what does love sound like this week?
Sounds like a good strategy. Love. We need to hear more about that. And I think that that's something that has certainly come through with all of your messages and sermons. Everything that you have been working on and tackling in the pulpit and outside the pulpit, this is the time in your career for you decided to write this book, White Noise. Tell us what inspired you to write this book at this moment.
Yeah, no, thank you for this question, Brother Braxton, because my publisher loves when I talk about right. So I wrote "Silencing White Noise: 6 Practices for Overcoming Our Inaction on Race." The impetus for writing this book was literally my 2-year-old son. At the time, he was a newborn. He's born in the middle of the pandemic. We are living. I was living. I don't want to impose my ideas and my experiences on to other people, but I was living with the early fatigue of what it meant to be confined to home, to be in many ways exiled from community, in-person community that we had built as a faith family. I'm living with that fatigue. But not only am I living with that fatigue, he's also born in the immediate aftermath of the tripartite emergence or confluence of the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. And so I'm thinking about just how vulnerable Black lives are. And I look at his face. I'm in Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan, and I'm looking in his face, and I start to question on whether or not it was a good idea to bring another Black child into a nation that has for so long been organized against people that look like him. Obviously, I know he'll have certain class privilege because of who I am. I know that he'll have he'll be insulated from some things because of my own status and station in the world, in even in a place like New York City. But it doesn't stop me from wondering, from wondering, how can I stop him from being thrown against the wall by police officers who may want to reinstitute stop and frisk in New York City? How do I guarantee that he is not overly disciplined in schools that have discipline policies that track alongside incarceration policies in places like New York and New Jersey? How can I guarantee that if he gets sick, that his symptoms will be honored and heard by a doctor, even a doctor that looks like him. I think about the vulnerability of his life, and I say to myself that even as a pastor, even as a millennial faith leader, even as someone who has done justice work since he was 18 years old, have I done enough to contribute to the kind of kinship that I really want America to be? Like, have I contributed to America being more in reality like the printed version of itself, a life of life, liberty, a land of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Have I done that work? And that was an impetus to write, to call all Christians, but particularly white Christians, to live up to the vocation of anti-racism, a calling to do the work of participating in the repair of the trauma, the harm, and the social nightmare that has been America since before 1619.
Well, I just want to say thank you for that book. I've been giving it to friends. I think it's required reading, and it's silencing the noise. Part of it is you have to recognize that it's there, right? And so much of us haven't even begun to have that conversation.
Facts, facts. Yeah, I talk about white noise as the silence, inaction, and misrepresentations that protect and perpetuate white supremacy. And I talk about it as white noise because it's always in the background. It's lulling us to sleep, lulling us into inaction, lulling us into believing that it's really not there, but it's always there, right? And I make this point, and I want to make the point that that whiteness is a noise, it's a grammar, it's a logic, it is something that's working beneath the surface, because it's not just about individual acts of overt racism. It's about how our laws work. It is about how our media presents certain things. It's about how we perceive one another. I often say this: white supremacy is so ingenious that it no longer needs white people to exist, because it is so baked into the fabric of our societies and our institutions, and it knows how to inhabit Black bodies without us even knowing that it's in us. And so, yeah, we do have to find a way to signal and cue the fact that this noise is with us.
Thank you, my brother. What you just said and what you've written is exactly what we need for this time. The title of my podcast series that I've been working on, as you know, is Journey in Strength. And this is a question I've asked everyone at the end of my podcast. What would you say, what wisdom advice do you have for people listening about how to journey in strength in the times that we're living in?
Yeah. Thank you for your podcast, for your work, but thank you for this question. At the end of the book, I draw a line from James Baldwin. James Baldwin is in Istanbul. He is being interviewed by a popular American periodical. And he just recently had his own experience with suicidal ideation. And they're talking about America. And the interviewer says, the reporter asked him, well, Baldwin, Mr. Baldwin, what about hope? And Baldwin says, hope. Hope must be invented every day. I think where we find the strength to continue this journey is realizing that hope is gritty, hope is jagged, hope is not blind optimism, but hope is learning how to stare at the disjointed, jagged, rugged pieces of our lives and learning how to transcend them in that moment. Every single day, we have to invent hope. Every office building, every sanctuary, every classroom, every hospital room, every banking office, every teller's booth becomes a laboratory for us to invent hope, for us to tell ourselves that today We are the hope that the world needs, in spite of how wearying it is, in spite of how effacing and disappointing life may be. Every day offers us an opportunity to invent hope, because we've been created in the image of an ever living, ever loving, ever present, ever creative God. And if we are created as creatives by a creative God, then obviously we can create hope every day.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you. I mean, your ministry, your words, your wisdom has given me hope. I listen to your church online often, and so I do appreciate all the hope that you've given me and countless others. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to me today.
That's encouraging, my brother. Thank you.
God bless you.
Bless you.
Amen. I draw your attention to the epistle of First John. First John chapter 4. We draw your attention to the epistolary literature of First John, this letter from John the Elder, chapter 4, commencing at verse 7. In fact, I'll read from verse 7b, and you'll find these words translated from Greek into English this way. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. For time as ours to share this morning, I want to think on the thought, be loved. Be loved. Love as a birthright to receive and give really marks our being. It marks what philosophy would call our ontology, the nature of our being. As children of God, love lives at our core. Love, a state of being and grace in the world, animates us to live out radical authenticity, unabridged by selfish expectations of crowded worlds, of meandering people, and it sensitizes us to permit others to do the same. Love as a state of being and a state of grace, it animates us to live out radical authenticity. It calls us to move beyond the selfish expectations of people who just meander through life. It sensitizes us to permit others to do the same. And in this moment, as we are spending a third week talking about the power of leaning into love, it's time for us to wake up from our violent slumber, to wake up from our spiritual narcolepsy and be love. This is really why our democracy is fragile and our communities are crumbling, is because there are too many people who wear crosses around their neck that have Jesus on them, but they have not figured out what it means to be love. We've not awoken to the power that is invested in us as a radical love revolutionaries, when you decide that you are a child of God, when you decide that you want to walk in the flow and walk in the movement of and the rhythms of that Palestinian carpenter, you are really saying that it's time for you to wake up from your spiritual and your political narcolepsy. That is where we have damned and we have abandoned our communities. It's because when the world needed a voice of love and a voice of justice, the church had been seized by spiritual narcolepsy. As children were being gunned down by people who were paid to protect them, the church was in a violent sleep. When students were being forced to learn from home, churches did not create opportunities to invest in families or to create extra opportunities for academic enrichment because the churches were asleep. And I understand that we are living in a once in a generation, in fact, a once in a century pandemic. But unfortunately, the work of the church, the work of churches does not become paused simply because of pandemic realities. But if we can be honest, there have been more before the pandemic, pre-COVID-19, the pre-existing condition of so many people who call themselves people of God was marked by spiritual narcolepsy, possessing love and showing love. That's really not enough for us to live out our highest ideals. It's one thing to possess love. It's another thing to want to receive love. But it's a whole other thing when you decide to embody love, when you decide to be love everywhere you go. The highest expressions of our being, the highest expressions of our ministries, the highest expressions of our lives is when we decide to embody the love of God in the world. Love remains something we must be if we dare to dissolve the violent lines that damn all of us. It is the essence of our creation. It's the price of the ticket into the world. I like that right there, is that love is our essence and love is the price of the ticket for what it means to be human. The word that we read today, this ancient text, this ancient letter from the pen of John the Elder, he says that God is love. And this is powerful because I'll remind us that as the people of God and because God is love, we were created in love, for love, to love. For me, love is the power to see and respond to life as if your destiny is tied to the destiny of everybody else. Can I say that again? Love is the power to see and respond to life as if your destiny is tied to everybody else's destiny. Dr. Virgil Wood, a 90-year-old veteran of the civil rights movement, he helps me think about the power and the potential of our sacred love lives. He calls this potentiating. Is that when you learn how to love, you start to unleash your potential. When you learn to be love, you start working in the process of potentiating, which means everything you do is breathing life into your potential. When we covenant to be love, the good moves from impossible to improbable to possible to probable. When you learn how to be love, the good of your life ceases to be an impossibility and it moves from the impossible to improbable to possible and then to probable. In fact, when you wake up tomorrow, you ought to tell yourself, everything I want to be is probable. It's not just possible, it's probable. It's more than likely going to happen because I have been created in love, for love, to love. The love of God incarnated in us moves the best in us from impossible to probable. God is love. We come from love. God as love makes our best possible. It makes our best probable. I will say it in the rhythm that I've said it in previous weeks. Be love when negative impulses want your attention. Be love when when injustice swirls around you. Be love when pressures mount and outlooks dip. Be love when disagreements surge and patience thins. Be love when religion, dogmatic, unforgiving, otherworldly, self-righteous ideology blocks the way. This is our time to do what the shirt says, and that is be love. As in many of Paul's doctrinal missives to the churches in the Roman imperial orbit, the Johannine letter, this trilogy of letters, it springs forth from a community fractured by disagreement and dispute, a church divided by power grabs and purity politics. Doesn't that sound so much like what we are enduring now, whether we're talking about Trenton or talking about a church, that we find that communities have become so racked by power grabs and purity politics. Everybody wants the attention and everybody needs to prove that they're right. Churches have been fractured by disagreement and dispute. But I love the way John the Elder, who's distinct from John the Apostle of the Gospel or John of Patmos of the book of Revelation, John the Elder, this leader of these churches, possibly in Ephesus, pins this insistence to love to a church that has been marked by and fractured by disagreement and dispute, a church that's been divided by power grabs and purity politics. But I love the fact that he decides to attack and assault the unacceptable, and the unacceptable is hatred and dispute. The unacceptable are power grabs and purity politics. He decides to attack the unacceptable with a call to love. I love the fact that that's what love is that love is our opportunity to attack that which is beneath what God has created us to be. I told you love is a part of your ontology. What does that mean? Love is a part of the very nature of your being. And when you decide to follow Jesus, you're deciding to be love in a world marked by power grabs and purity politics. Howard Thurman makes this distinction between the religion of Jesus and the religion about Jesus. The admonition to lean into love is a call for us to practice the religion of Jesus instead of the religion about Jesus. You've heard me do this before, because the religion about Jesus simply rehearses his story, where he was born, to whom was he born, who did he heal, how did he die, was there an empty tomb. That's just the religion about Jesus. But the religion of Jesus says we are called to live out his story of love. The religion about Jesus sacralized slavery, and the religion of Jesus gave us emancipation. The religion about Jesus allies itself with white patriarchal billionaires now living in Florida, and the religion of Jesus says I'll risk my 501c3 in order to get us free. The religion about Jesus shuts down the government and shuts down the government for walls and for health care, and the religion of Jesus invests in refugees from Latin America and from Haiti. The religion about Jesus is pro-life before birth, and the religion of Jesus is pro-life from the womb through the tomb. The religion about Jesus protects pedophiles and sexual violators, but the religion of Jesus empowers the Me Too movement. The religion about Jesus baptizes mass incarceration in bad theology, but the religion of Jesus says I must set the captive free. I need somebody that can say, when I decide to be love, I'm not practicing the religion about Jesus. I'm practicing the religion of Jesus. I want to wake up every day and declare I'm probable, because the love of God does not just have me, but the love of God is in me. Can I get somebody to say that's what I'm doing this week? I'm going to learn in the name of justice and in the name of Jesus, in the name of the beloved community, in the tradition of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm going to be be love. Drawing on Paul Tillich's thinking, Dr. King once said, power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love realizing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that's standing against love. We are called to practice love that's tied to power that makes justice possible. The community that we see in this text, this community that John the Elder is wrestling with, this community has a cohort, a minority of detractors, people that we would probably call hell raisers, who didn't know how to practice love. And isn't it interesting that the very people who could not download and digest the message of love that John the Elder is communicating are the people who wanted to refuse the idea that Jesus was ever a human being. They practiced what would later be titled Docetism. These were people who believed in Jesus, but they did not believe Jesus had a body. They did not believe Jesus was interested in engaging the world. The rogue group, they devalued the human body by denying Jesus' flesh and believed the church should be uninvolved in the world. These same people who did not know how to love also didn't know how to show up for people whose bodies needed to be cared for and needed to be pushed forward. And that is one of the dangers of a religion that is so otherworldly that it doesn't take seriously the power of people's bodies or the sacredness of people's bodies. You cease to be Christian when you give up on people. You cease to be Christian when you only want to get people to heaven without helping them navigate and negotiate the hell down here. The people who didn't want to love in John's church were the people who didn't believe that there was something sacred about the human body. And maybe that's a word that we can say here just for a moment for those of us who really want to be loved, is that you have to give up giving up on people. This is not the time where you have governments that are banning us by stealing our votes. You have schools that are not doing the work of educating our minds. You have healthcare institutions that are driving up prices and insurance companies that are denying people in the middle of a pandemic. Now is not the time for Jesus people of Jesus, to give up on people. It's time for us to give up on giving up on people. That's why John the Elder calls this body denying cohort of detractors and distractors the Antichrist. The Antichrist care little about the bodies condemned to alienation and disregard. Don't miss this. The Antichrist in the text is not some cosmic being associated with the devil. The Antichrist were people who didn't want to protect and invest in people's bodies. People who were disrupting the church because they didn't know how to love bodies. People who were raising hell in churches because they didn't know how to love bodies. People who don't know how to love, that's what John the Elder would call the Antichrist. There's something quite anti-Christian about loving souls and rejecting bodies. We cannot do what Aubrey Hendricks calls treating the needs of people as holy if we only care about souls. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., it is his weekend, we might as well quote him again. He says, any religion which professes to be concerned with the souls of men and is not concerned with the slums that damn them, the economic conditions that strangle them, or the social conditions that cripple them, he called that dry as dust religion. It may be dry as dust religion for Martin, but it's what the Bible, it's what John the Elder calls anti-Christian, the Antichrist. One of my students at Memphis Theological Seminary, where I lead a doctoral cohort in public leadership and theology, he told us a story story about his uncle who fostered a strained relationship to the church due to its palpable hypocrisy and sideline posture. Don't miss that. This old man decided he didn't want to be connected to the church because of the hypocrisy of Christians and the sideline posture of churches. They never wanted to get in the fight. The uncle, now advanced in years, sat my student down to communicate his vision for the church. He told his nephew, who was now a middle-aged pastor, he said, I don't need you to save my soul. I need you to save my butt. And that's what makes Christianity a movement of Jesus. When we want to save people's butts, when the despairing forces of collective hate and hurt abandon them. Voter suppression is anti-Christian. Gerrymandering is anti-Christian. Refusal to pass new protections of voting rights is anti-Christian. Segregation is anti-Christian. Police brutality is anti-Christian. A school to prison pipeline is anti-Christian. And it's high time for us as the people of God to stand up and be loved. And when you stand up and be loved, you have to have the power to expose that which poses as Christian but is really anti-Christian. Be loved, be loved, be loved, be loved. I love this. I love this because it says anybody who loves is born of God, and those who do not love, they do not know God, because God is love. Love armors us to resist the penchant to reduce ourselves to the image of our adversaries and opposition. When you are love, you avoid following your enemies. You're allowing your enemies to cause you to act like them. There's no space in you for hate when love has become the core of your being. I wish I could have somebody who could put in the chat, I'm too big to hate. I'm too much connected to God to hate. And there are reasons that people will give you to move into your most base inclinations and your most obvious tendencies. But when you decide to be love, you tell yourself, no, I will not allow myself to perform and to conform to the behaviors that you're imposing on me. Despite the anger the rogue members of this ancient community had, and the ways they targeted, the elder preaches love as a non-violent weapon. The elder preaches in the face of distraction, in the face of chronic disagreement, in the face of disagreeableness, in the face of rumors and lies, in the face of bad actors and also bad rumors. The elder says your response to people who don't love bodies, your response to people who are more interested in their power than they are in the praise of God, people who are more interested in their promotion than they are in people's transformation. Your only answer for them has to be love. And this is the agape love. This is dutiful love. This is the love that says, I don't love you based on your merit. I love you based on your humanity. I don't love you based on what you've done for me, but I love you because you've come from the same God I come from. There's some people you don't have to deal with, but you have to love them. There's some people that you do not have to invite into your inner circle, but you have to love them. There's some people who will use their tongues to assassinate your dreams, but you have to love them. There's some people who will decide that you don't deserve the positions and the power that you have, but you have to love them. Beware of being tricked out of your highest potential by people and by things that want to lower you down to their base level. Extremism of our politics politics and the unboundaried platforms of our social media tutor us to hate and make it sacred for us to be divided. The tutorials of hate, everything around us is tutoring us to walk against love and walk against love and move against love. Did you hear what I just said? From social media to our politics, everything is tutoring us to live a life that is beneath the high calling of love. Tutorials of hatred abound in common parlance and in religious habit. But I need you to know hatred does not hurt anybody but the host. Hatred consumes its host, not its object. The reminder that God is love calls us to task for the purpose of divesting from the impulses that come so natural and have been reared by the malignant dimensions of our culture. He recognized with authentic realism that anybody who permits another person to determine the quality of their inner life, they've already handed over the keys. When you let them cause you to speak out of turn, you have handed the keys of your destiny over to them. When you begin to go tick for tat and you say what they would have said, you've handed your keys, the keys of your destiny, over to them. When you begin to replicate the same harm on them that they inflicted on you, you have handed the keys to them of your destiny. But love, when love is your arsenal of armor, you don't have to replicate and show the immaturity, the love deficiency, the half-hearted pretending that other people have, because why would you let your integrity be lowered when love is what lifted you? Somebody will say their love protects my mind, and love protects my habits, and love protects my way of life. When you decide you love God and you've decided to be love, you are saying, I pledge allegiance not to a flag, but I pledge allegiance to the deepest parts of my being. If I'm born of God, I pledge allegiance to the core of who I am, and that means I will not come down just because you're pulling at me. I swear, somebody ought to say, I'm getting ready to swear some allegiances right now. I swear to resist becoming as bitter as they are. I swear to resist becoming as destructively angry as they are. I swear to resist mimicking bitterness like they do. I swear to resist diminishing the power of my tongue like they do. I swear to resist lowering my standards like they do. I swear to resist compromising my integrity like they do. I swear to resist allowing myself to become clones of the detractors, the deniers, and the distractions that want to twist my soul out of place. Somebody say, I woke up today because it's time to be loved. I love this. I love this. I love this. I love this. I love this because there's a word that says, I'm too loved to hate. I'm too loved to hate. You all remember Mamie Till. Some of you all have been watching Women of the Movement. What a good series that is. It's indicating showing us some things we might have missed about the life of Emmett, particularly Mamie Till. One time Mamie Till was asked, this is the mother of Emmett Till, was asked if she harbored anger and bitterness toward the two men responsible for fatally terrorizing her son in 1955. And she said it certainly would be unnatural not to hate them, but guess what? I must say I'm unnatural because the Lord has been my shield. She said it was natural for me to hate, but I decided not to be natural. I decided that God would be my shield, and I'm too loved to hate. Somebody ought to get like Mamie Till and say, love makes me supernatural. Sacrificing for justice, that's supernatural. Turning the other cheek, that's supernatural. Not paying one infraction with another infraction, that's supernatural. Standing up for children of no blood relation to you, that's supernatural. Giving out of your poverty, that's supernatural. supernatural. Is there anybody that can put in the chat, love makes me feel supernatural without denying my limits? I need somebody that can say, Lord, I thank you that love is not always natural, but we weren't created to just be natural. There's some power in us that's supernatural. How do you know it? Because every human being has some supernatural in them. I'm not talking about the way black women have been superheroes in our communities and have been forced to carry labor and forced to carry our communities forward. I thank God that my mother is a superhero. I thank that God for that every day. But there's been an undue burden that we've placed on black women and have forced them to bail us out over and over and over again. That's not what I'm talking about when I talk about us being supernatural. I'm saying in every human being, because they've been created in the image of an ever-living, ever-loving, ever-present, ever-creative God, there's some supernatural in them. I need somebody to write in the chat, there's some supernatural in me. I have some flaws, but there's supernatural in me. I make a lot of mistakes, but there's some supernatural in me. I don't always love the way I'm supposed to love, but there's some supernatural in me. Haven't achieved everything I thought my life would bring into being, but there's some supernatural in me. How do I know there's some supernatural in you? Because it says anybody that loves knows God, has been born of God, and God is love. Somebody say, I thank God for my real birthday. I thank God that my real birthday is not in the hospital in Atlantic Care or in Philadelphia or Shore Memorial or mainland, but my real birthday happened in the imagination of God. Because just like Jeremiah was able to say, before I was in my mother's womb, God knew me. You ought to be able to say that about yourself. There's some supernatural in you because if there's breath in your body, you've been born of God. That word born gives us the Greek. It's the Greek word geneo. It's the Greek word geneo, which gives us the root of the English words like generation and genetic and gene. I like that right there. It says, I've been born of God. I've been generated by God. I have some of God's DNA in my genetics. I have a God gene. Did y'all hear what I just said? And don't think about that in the sense of some scientific, cellular, or anatomical sense. I'm talking about your essence. I'm talking about your real origins. I'm talking about your real birthday. Is that all of us are born with some God in our genes, some God in our DNA. And when the particularities of your life blind you to your worth and derail your priorities, you ought to settle into the winding truth that God is in your DNA. That's the story of agape love. That's a storied concept of unconditional, unqualified, undeserved, unrequested, unearned love. I like that right there. I have a God gene in me because I know I'm the product of unconditional, unqualified, undeserved, unrequested, unearned love. Can I do that again? I know I have a God gene in me because I'm the product of a God who is love, unconditional, unqualified, undeserved, unrequested, unearned love. I feel like I need to say that one more time until somebody hears it in the back. I know there's some supernatural in me because I have a God gene, and my God gene comes from the fact that I am the product of unearned, unrequested, undeserved, unconditional, unqualified, unearned love. because my God is big L love. My God is everything that I need. Is there anybody that can thank God that you have a God gene? What's your God gene? I love the Lord my God with all my heart and all my mind and all my soul and my neighbor as myself. That's the God gene. Love those that spitefully use you and pray for your enemies. Somebody say, I thank God for the God gene. That's the power of our great God, that God shows us that we are born of God, that we have God in our genetics. We have God in our genes. What's your God gene? I'm not talking about your physical, I'm not talking about the genes that science can calculate. I'm talking about that which is at the core of who you are, and that is a God gene. Maybe there's somebody that's listening today that says, I thank God that God is not just a being that lives outside of me, but I have a God gene within me that reminds me I've been born of God. I've been generated by God. I have God genetically in me. I have a God gene. What's that God gene you have? That you are the product of unconditional, unqualified, undeserved, unrequested, unearned love that predates the very foundations of the universe. Somebody today wants to connect with this God that loves you. You can do that by hitting us in the DMs. You can send us a text. You can put something. You can send us a text. You can send us an email. You can give us a phone call. You can even put it in the chat. But today's the day that you decide you want to be loved. And you tell yourself, I don't have bad genes. I have a God gene. Not some scientific, verifiable, quantifiable, categorizable idea. No, I have a God gene that is embedded deep in me because I was created from unconditional, unqualified, undeserved, unrequested, unearned. God, we thank you today for your grace that's so amazing. We're grateful that we don't just have love, but we can be love. God, strengthen us on a daily basis and remind us that we can go where we've never gone, see what we've never seen, do what we've never done, and be what we've never been. We can do it because you created us in love, because you are. And so on this King weekend, on this year of 2022, may we lean into love so much so that it becomes synonymous with our being. It's in your name we pray with thanksgiving. Amen.